All right, this is my civil rights movement presentation, and I'm waiting a minute. So the first slide, why this movement interests me. I've always been fascinated by how ordinary people can come together and create real change, and that's exactly what the civil rights movement shows. I thought I related to it because it's all about fairness, equality, and challenging injustice, things I really value in my own daily life. And even though most of the movement happened decades ago, its impact is still visible today in voting rights, education, and racial justice. Which really stands out to me is how persistent and organized the activists were, showing that collective action can truly shift society. Going to the second slide, this movement is important to me because it reshaped both laws and social attitudes in the U.S. and expanded civil rights protections for everyone, not just one group of people. Their strategies and successes of the movement also set a blueprint for future social movements. Basically, it just proves that when people organize and speak up, they can hold institutions accountable and make society more just for everyone, and not just one individual demographic of people. Third slide, the civil rights movement aimed to end segregation and discrimination. It wasn't just about changing laws, it was about transforming culture and attitudes towards race and equality as a whole. These activists fought for fair access to voting, education, and public spaces based on the principle that everyone deserves equal participation in society. So that's the purpose of it. Slide 4, the type of social movement. I think it's a reform movement, which means that the goal is it's not to overthrow the government, but it's to change unfair laws and practices. These activists, they work to reform public institutions like schools and workplaces and to protect voting rights. Reform movements like this shows how collective action can gradually reshape society from within. Slide 5. So the 3 stages of social movements in the chapter that Conley explained. There's emergent, which is first, which is where people recognize a problem and start speaking out. Secondly, there's coalescence, where the movement organizes, recruits members, and launches protests or campaigns. And then finally, there's routinization, which is when the movement becomes more formalized with leadership and structured strategies. The civil rights movement followed this pattern from early complaints about segregation to organized marches and lasting organizations. Slide 6. The movement focused on several different targets. It challenged federal and state governments enforcing segregation, discriminatory courts, and public institutions like schools and buses, private businesses, and even social attitudes. Activists worked to change laws, policies, and public perception at the same time. Example of that I can think of is obviously like Rosa Parks, and how, as I said, public institutions like buses, that was a big deal, and that sparked a fire in activists back then. Slide 7, changes resulting from the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement achieved major legal and social changes. Laws like the Civil Rights Act and voting rights. They actively ended formal segregation and increased political representation for Black Americans. It also inspired other movements, showing that the organized activism can bring real societal change. Slide 8. So the movement had many positive results. I put them all on a bulleted list, and they had some negative results as well. I think the positive ones are, legal protections, obviously, desegregation, raising awareness about racial injustice, but, some challenges still remain, including, systemic racism and economic inequality. The movement also, I think, highlights that social change doesn't stop with just a few laws. It's an ongoing effort that requires continued action by everyone in future generations. And so that's why, it's obviously so important to teach your kids growing up, because, that's how you mold them into having, adequate values. Slide 9, recommendations for the continued progress. Even today, as I just said, the progress isn't complete. Education about racial inequality, better voter access, and economic equity initiative. Oh, they're all important. Yeah. So activism and community engagement can help tackle local issues, also connecting racial injustice with other society equity efforts like gender and LGBTQ rights can make this movement even stronger. So that's basically just saying, relating to other activist movements can help fuel the fire almost. There's other people who feel super strongly about different things, like LGBTQ, and y'all can come together and you can find shared ground between those. In conclusion, to wrap up, the civil rights movement is a clear example of how collective action can lead to lasting change. It transferred laws, attitudes, and opportunities for marginalized groups, but there's still obviously work to do. Studying this movement helps us understand how organized activism works and shows that fighting for equality is an ongoing effort. Its legacy continues to inspire social movements today. And then my last slide is obviously my references. So, thank you.